calling into question this idea of a hypertrophy zone or rep range that helps you build muscle. There's some truth to it, there's a lot of myth around it. Let's get into the details here. What we're discussing is this, what I call the repetition spectrum, the repetition range spectrum. And this is a natural occurrence in the observation between the relationship between time and tension. So on the right side, you've got supposedly strength zone, right? This is high tension, low repetitions because we have a lot of tension in the muscle, but we can't hold a lot of tension in a muscle for very long, so we only have a few repetitions or low amounts of time. On the other end of the spectrum, infinitely heading in that direction, we have the opposite. We have relatively low amounts of tension, but we can hold that for longer periods of time, so we have a lot more repetitions. Supposedly in the middle, we've got the hypertrophy zone, which kind of makes sense, but kind of not, as I'll get into in a second here. But what this is doing is it gives us this idea that different zones get us different results. And it's kind of true, kind of not. The biggest myth about this idea is that you only build these results in these zones. So over here, if you're only doing low reps, high resistance, then you're only building strength. You won't build muscle, you won't build endurance, only strength. Here, you only build muscle. No strength, no endurance, just muscle. And here, only endurance. You'll never build any muscle with high reps. You'll never build any strength with high reps. This type of thinking is flat out just incorrect. Because what this spectrum is actually doing is it's observing the relationship between time and tension. However, we need to recognize that all exercises include both time and tension. All exercises use tension, and all exercises have it for some amount of time. Even doing one rep is some amount of time. So to say that you only build strength or only tension-inducing results is a misguided thing, because of course you have some measure of endurance, even if you're only doing one repetition. And over here, even if you're doing 100 reps, you have a lot of endurance, but there's still some tension equating to some level of strength on this end here. So what does this mean? This hypertrophy zone? Well, the idea now that we're looking at is that we build muscle not for an aesthetic demand. We've been told for many years that we can tell our muscles or our body to look a certain way by exercise, but this is not entirely true. As I explained in my book, there's no such thing as an aesthetic demand from exercise. All exercise produces a functional demand. Every exercise, no matter what you're doing or how you're doing it, is telling and preparing your body to perform the action of the movement, specifically through the balance between time and tension. So no matter what you're doing, your brain says, hey muscle, I need you to have a certain amount of tension for a certain amount of time to be able to functionally do this exercise as I want. That's the only instructions we've got. We don't have any sort of instructions saying, I want you to be toned or lean or jacked or ripped or anything like that. But that doesn't mean we can't make our muscles bigger. We just can't tell them through an aesthetic demand. How do we make them bigger? By improving the complete functional demand of the muscle. In other words, both time and tension. We want the muscles to hold more tension progressively over time. We want the muscle to hold more that tension for longer periods of time. So we need both time or tension, strength, and endurance, which is why in the previous video I talked about how the optimal way to build muscle may not to be in this zone, but both build strength and endurance. You can do this going back and forth, but now that middle zone kind of makes sense, because over here we may be building a lot of strength, but not so much endurance. And over here you may be building a lot of endurance, but maybe not so much strength. And the lack of both, of either strength or endurance, may be inhibiting your results. So this middle ground now makes a lot of sense for building muscle. But is it the only way? No, of course not. Because you can build some strength and some endurance here, but you'll build more strength and more endurance by going back and forth between the two. And you can, of course, go in the middle here. But the big lesson here is there's no necessarily hypertrophy zone, because everywhere involves both time and tension, which are the two ingredients you need to build muscle. So the hypertrophy zone isn't necessarily in the middle, it's the entire spectrum in itself, because you need time and tension, and you get that no matter where you are on the spectrum. But moving along the spectrum gives you the ability to develop as much strength and endurance as possible rather than staying stuck in one zone. Hopefully that makes some sense for you. Let me know if you have questions below. Fit, live free.